I'm Joel Bond. Early this year, due to a growing global pandemic, I found myself stranded here on this beautiful Greek island as flights were grounded and borders were closed, essentially closing off all routes home to my place of residence in Iraqi Kurdistan. With nothing but lots of time on my hands, I have videos to make for you every day during this quarantine time. These are my locked down life lessons for you. Please feel free to like and share anything that you see from any of these videos. A few years ago, I was a manager for a summer school in England. The summer school brought in children from all around the world to learn English, and as part of the summer, we had one young woman from Spain who arrived as a group leader. She was a chaperone for a dozen or so young Spanish children, and it was a new job for her, full of promise. She had a new boyfriend back in Spain with a new apartment, she was newly pregnant, and had everything kind of going for her in this summer season. Well, she was also under a lot of pressure to do a good job, and not only from parents, but from herself. She put herself under a lot of intense scrutiny. She wanted to do everything she possibly could to make sure that this would be the best experience for these children. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but she began to put her worth and her identity in getting the job done and doing it well. So much so that when she arrived for the first night, she found herself screaming at me in order to provide certain things for these children that was simply unreasonable and out of our control. When things didn't quite go as planned for some of the children, she would have parents on the phone screaming in her ear to make sure that this must be done and this must be changed. She was in pressure from all directions. Well, all of that to say, she really, really wanted to do a good job, but the tension needed some kind of release. So one day she came into the main auditorium, it's about 3 weeks into her stay, and out of complete exasperation, let out the most soul-wrenching scream I have ever heard as she collapsed on the floor in a total and complete breakdown. 2 of my colleagues went out to console and comfort her and to see what they could do to help, but unfortunately at that point, the tension had been so great and she'd carried so much of it in her body that the unspeakable happened the following day when she miscarried her unborn child. It was an awful experience for everyone involved. My colleague Ida, shout out to her, who has been an inspiration for today's video, said to me just today, does the whole world need to shut down for us to know that our worth is not defined by what we produce, by what we do? You see, in the case of this young Spanish woman, she had really put her worth and her identity in what she was producing. And while producing an output is a part of our world, we live in a world where you have to make so many widgets to make so much money in order to buy goods and services in the future, and that's okay. But in the case of this woman, she put her entire self-worth in her ability to make things happen. Now, you might ask yourself, if that's not what we should be doing, how do you measure the worth of a man? Well, I'd argue that's kind of an absurd question to place worth on a person's life like that. Because if you measure it by wealth, well then the Bill Gates and the Jeff Bezos of the world are better than everyone else. But I think we would all argue that's not necessarily true, they're just wealthier. And if we measure it by intelligence, well then the Einsteins and the Hawkings of the world are what we need to be aspirational towards. But that's also not how you measure someone's value. I think really the old adage of you can judge a man's character by the company he keeps is really the best answer to our question. In other words, love. How well do you love, and how much have you been loved in this life? That's really the path forward through this crisis. is love. For all of us struggling in this pressure cooker with sleepless nights and trying to figure out how to make ends meet, and joblessness and quarantine and everything that's happening in this crisis, I don't deny that it's difficult and that we need to find out ways to produce money and to produce goods and services to help each other. But ultimately, the path through all of this towards peace is love. The Christian scriptures have a section in them that's often reserved for readings at weddings, but I think applies just as well to any situation or circumstance where we need to love one another and care for one another as we do now. The section I'd like to read to you comes from the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 13. I'll just read a few sections from it for you. It says, as a definition, love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous. It does not brag and is not proud. It's not rude, and it is not selfish, and it cannot be made angry easily. Love does not remember wrongs done against it. Love is never happy when others do wrong, but it is always happy with truth. Love never gives up on people. It never stops trusting. It never loses hope, and never quits. In this season, may you love well. Don't lose hope. Keep your trust, and don't give up. We'll see you tomorrow.